internet and will be available to view online now and in the future. We welcome the use of Welsh language at meetings, but I've had no requests for people to speak Welsh today, so this meeting will be conducted in English only. Members in the chamber, please be aware that we are all on camera and you may be visible on screen when people around you are speaking. And please remember to speak clearly into your microphones. Members participating remotely, can you please refrain from using the chat function and instead use the raised hand icon to indicate when you wish to speak. Please remember to keep your microphones muted when you're not talking. Moving on to the agenda. Agenda item 1, attendance. Democratic Services will be making a note of members' attendance in the meeting, but should you lose connection, could you possibly leave a comment in the chat bar on your return to ensure this is picked up. Agenda item 2, apologies for absence. Dominique, have we any apologies, please?
Well, apologies from Councillor Giles Davis.
Thank you. Are there any apologies from the floor? On screen? Thank you. Agenda item 3, the declarations of interest. Gareth Harris, Monitoring Officer and Assistant Chief Legal Officer, have you any advice for members, please?
Thank you, Presiding Member. There are a number of declarations today, so if you can bear with me. With regard to agenda item number 9, which relates to the budget, my advice is that members should declare personal interest if you are a member of a community council. So I'm aware of the following interest. With regard to members of the Pontypool Community Council, we've got Councillor Sue Malson. If I could ask Councillor Malson to confirm. Thank you. Councillor Nicola Simons. Thank you. Councillor Linda Clarkson.
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you. Councillor Gaynor James. Councillor John James. Councillor Caroline Price.
Correct.
Thank you. And Councillor Nick Byrne.
Yeah, that's correct.
Thank you. And then Cwmbran Community Council, we've got Councillor Sue Morgan.
Correct.
Thank you. Councillor Peter Jones.
Correct.
And on Hentless Community Council, Councillor Colette Thomas. Pennegarn and St Cardex, Councillor Rosemary Matthews. Thank you. And Blaenau Town Councillor Liam Coles.
That's correct, Gareth, yes.
Are there any other members on community councils before I move on?
Yes.
Yeah. Ron Burnett, Hentless.
John Horner?
Yeah.
John Horner, Pontypool.
Stuart Ashley?
Yeah, and Stuart Ashley, Cwmbran Community Council.
Is that everyone?
Yeah. Ron Burnett, did you get me, Chair?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Burnett. Councillor David Williams?
Yes, Chair. Crossy and Llanrabban Community Council.
Thank you. Does that complete your declarations on the Community Council? Thank you.
And then, thank you. With regard to agenda item number 12, the Park Celyn petition response, my advice is that if you or a close personal associate lives at this development, you'll have a personal and prejudicial interest and should leave the meeting when this item is being discussed. Now, I haven't been made aware of any interest regarding this item. With regard to number 13, the expansion of Crownbridge School, if you will have a personal interest if you are a council-appointed governor at the school, and will have a personal and prejudicial interest if you are a governor not appointed by the council, or if you or a close personal associate attends or works at the school and will need to leave the meeting when this item is being discussed. I understand that Councillors Joanne Gordon, Councillor Carl Gordon and Councillor Liam Coles all have a personal and prejudicial interest, having a close personal associate who works at the school and will leave the meeting when this item is being discussed. Could I ask each member to confirm that interest, please?
That's correct, Gareth, yes.
That's correct.
I can confirm that too. Thank you. With regard to the pay policy statement, which is agenda item number 16, you will have a personal and prejudicial interest if you have a close personal associate who works for the authority. The policy statement does not cover teachers or school support staff, but does include employees of the SRS. So if you have such an interest, you will need to leave the meeting when this item is being discussed. So I'm aware of the members who have the following interests, having a close personal associate who works for the authority. Firstly, Councillor Janet Jones. I can ask Councillor Jones to confirm.
Yes, confirm.
Thank you. Councillor Sue Molson.
My daughter works for Turbine.
Thank you. Councillor Jane Watkins.
Yes, that's correct.
Councillor Alan Slade.
Correct.
And Councillor Rose Seaborn.
That's correct.
As Councillor Rose Seaborn will be leaving the meeting during that item, just to let you know, Councillor Stuart Ashley, the Deputy Presiding Member, will be chairing the item, that item. I also want to make the Council aware of advice to officers. With regard to the pay policy statement, which is agenda item number 16, all officers will need to leave the room when this item is being discussed. But can I ask Council to agree that Jason Lewis, the Corporate Director of Resources, is given permission to stay as he's presenting the report, and also for the Democratic Services officers, namely Dominic Redman and Chris Slade, to stay in order to assist with the operation of the meeting. So can I ask members to agree that?
Have a show of hands, please. Thank you, that's agreed.
Thank you. And finally, with regard to item number 15, which is the appointment of replacement head of Democratic Services, Jason Lewis will be leaving the meeting when this item is being discussed, as he is affected by the report. Thank you, Presiding Member.
Thank you, Della. Seems to be a lot of movement in this chamber this morning. So, takes us to agenda item 4, which is the confirmation of council minutes. These are starting on page 5, and they're for the 24th of the 1st, 2023. Members, could you possibly state whether you have anything to raise in relation to the minutes? If not, I will take them as approved. I take those as approved. Thank you very much. Agenda item 5 is the update on actions. Members, the updates on what has been done to implement our previous decisions start on page 33 of the agenda. Could you possibly indicate whether you have any questions or comments? Don't see anything, so I ask members to note the update on actions, please. Yes, thank you. Agenda item 6, the receipt of petitions. We have one petition today. The petition is in relation to Woodland Park. I've considered the petition from Woodland Park Qualifying Residents Association in accordance with paragraph 4.17 of the Constitution and the Protocol for Public Petitions. The petition alleges that residents were not informed of the new licence with modified conditions until June 2022, and that officers illegally obstructed the handover of the licence and its detail to residents for nearly a year. The resolutions being sought are: 1. An independent investigation into the conduct of paid services is instigated. 2. The licensing process and administration of Woodland Park is moved to Torvine's Licensing Committee. And 3. Urgently, compliance notices are issued for all 10 breaches. I've come to the decision to reject the petition with regard to the first point, which is the request for the independent investigation into the conduct of paid services. In accordance with paragraph 3 of the Protocol, employee matters will not be dealt with through the petition process. As for the other 2 resolutions, which are for the licensing process to be dealt with by the Licensing Committee and for compliance notices to be issued, these requests are a continuation of vexatious requests. My decision as presiding member is final and it's not open for debate. Thank you. That takes us to agenda item 7, public question time. There are no public questions, so we'll move on. Agenda item 8, announcements for the leader or the chief exec. Leader, do you have any announcements, please?
Thank you, Presiding Member. I've just got 4 announcements this morning. First of all, congratulations to the Torvine Play Service, whose awards were held last night at the Congress Theatre. It was a pleasure to attend these awards and see the excellent work done by the staff of the Play Service and the volunteers, who do a fantastic job transforming the lives of children who get the chance to play across Torvine. We heard about over 2,500 children a day playing, for example, in the summer play schemes alone, about the term time activities and the other holiday and respite activities that the play service do. That service is a fantastic example for me of a really community-focused service, and one that discharges its very important duties with a great ethos that benefits both the young people who attend the play scheme, but also those who volunteer and work in them. We heard some great stories of the alumni from the play service who've gone on to jobs, including jobs in teaching assistants, other areas of play, and it's a really good example of a service that has a great impact in our community. So I'd like to thank Julian and all the team for the fantastic work they do. Secondly, I'd like to pay tribute to Nancy Selkeld, who members will know well, as her retirement approaches. This will be her last full council meeting, and I'd like to say thank you to Nancy, not only for putting up with me, other leaders and members over the years, but also her fantastic contribution to this council and the people that we serve. We'll miss her, but we wish her a long and happy retirement. Presuming Nancy doesn't run in and kill me for mentioning it like that in public, I'd like to two more announcements if that's possible, Madam Presiding Member. Thirdly, I'd like to thank Councillor David Daniels for putting together the mould and damp surgeries that we're holding next week alongside partners. They will be held in Blenavon on Tuesday, in Pontypool Market on Wednesday, and in Cwmbran Library on Thursday. There's further details that have been sent out to all members, and I'm sure David will be more than happy to provide you with more details after the meeting if you'd like them. Those are a great opportunity for people to come along and to receive advice, not only on mould and damp, but on other housing and living cost issues if they wish to. Lastly, I'd like to welcome the High Sheriff, Malgwyn Davies, to the meeting today. Malgwyn is a great friend of Torvine and has been a fantastic support to us over his year of office. So I'd like to welcome him to the meeting and to ask, with your permission, Presiding Member, for him to address us as a council.
Thank you. It's great to be back in this room. I have very fond memories of it in my time in local government. Mostly fond anyway, but it was in the days of two-tier local government and quite a few battles in this room as well, between the county and Torvine as it was then. But mostly fond memories. And thank you so much for inviting me here today. It's been a pleasure to work with you, Deputy Leader and the Chief Executive, and other people that I've met along my time in office, which was only 11 months. If I can just say very briefly that High Sheriffs have been around for a very, very long time, 1,000 years in fact. Initially it was quite an onerous task. We were asked to collect the taxes for the King or Queen, not a popular task in itself. And just to let you know where the name comes from, a tax collector is a reeve and a county is a shire. So we were the Shire Reeve, and now we've become the Sheriff, of course, because that's been merged. But in addition to that, we were also responsible for catching villains, forming a posse, and going around with good men and true. Not so enlightened days then, because it was only men that did this, and we would catch the villains and then put them in the prison, and that was the prison that the High Sheriff owned as well. But then there'd have to be a trial, and the High Sheriff would be the judge in that trial. So, as I say, a very onerous task. None of those, thank goodness, I have to do today. But when you think of it, it was, in a way, a rudimentary form of local government, as I saw it, and as I see it. And I think that what I've tried to do is to reflect that in a modern era. How can I help communities as best I can during my year of office? And one of the first things I thought, because of my background, is that I must make contact with the local authorities in the area. So I set up meetings with the leader, chief executive, and the deputy in Torvine's case, but the leader and chief executive of the other four authorities, and said, what can we do together to enhance the people who live in the county of Gwent, in my case, or the residents of Torvine in your case. That's what I was about. What can I do? I don't have many powers left, if any at all, but I think I can add to the occasion, perhaps, in the way I dress, that I am a representative of the Crown, although the Lord Lieutenant is the representative of the Crown in the county. I recognise that, of course, and he would take precedence if present. But anyway, something like that might help. But I also like to go along and say to people, well done, fantastic work. I'm asked, my year is not over yet, I've got another month left, but I'm often asked, what is the highlight, would you say, of your year of office? And it isn't a highlight as such. There is one, I suppose, which I'll come back to. But the main thing has been meeting people. And the way I describe it, beautiful people. And I'm not talking about the way they look. I'm talking about what they do for their communities. And if I can recognise that in any way by mentioning them on Twitter or whatever, I do it now. I've never done it for 3/4 of a century. I won't be doing it when I retire either. But I do my best now to bring attention to those people. Not what I do, but what they do is important. So I've met some lovely people in Torvine. I went to Pontier to see the community hall there and the fantastic work they're doing. I went to see Sue and her colleagues at the Friends of Pontnewydd Park. Just people working hard for their communities, and it was great to see. And I also visited the boxing club, the Warriors. What great work that man is doing there for the people of Torvine. So that's just examples of it. But the other things I've done in Torvine, I've been to pass out parades for the police in Llantarnam and various other places. And when you see what they're doing there in terms of those police officers, so proud to become police officers, their parents and loved ones are there, and at the same time there's all this bad publicity about one or two rogue elements within the police service, and some in Gwent, unfortunately, that's been tackled. But it's so sad to think that they were being tarred with that brush, if you like, because they were fresh people ready to go. There's one man I met there, and he's with his granddaughter, and the person in the room passing up was his daughter, the middle generation. And he was saying, it only seemed like yesterday that I was here, and my daughter, who's become a police officer today, was the little one with me. You know, just the generations of people getting involved in a service like that. But what I can do practically, I can actually hand certificates to people. It's called a High Sheriff Award, and it's not Malwyn Davis's award, it's the High Sheriff's Award. That's the importance of it. I can hand that out to people who've done good things in their community, and I've been seeking nominations for that. I think I've handed out about a dozen at present, and 2 of them are in Torvine, the community, Pontier Community Hall, Community Playing Fields team, presented to them, and also Glenavon Youth Strategy Group presented an award to them at the TVA event. Next Saturday, we have an event in High Sheriff's Award, and this is a financial award to people, and we're doing that next week, and there'll be about a dozen organisations within Gwent that will receive funding from us, up to £5,000, for the work that they do in engaging young people in a positive way, which then prevents them becoming involved in a negative way by committing crimes, or worse still, becoming the victim of crimes. So we're looking for organisations that can help us with that. The highlight of the year, and it isn't really a highlight, I suppose, but it's a memory, and that is that I was the one in office when Her Majesty passed away. When you're appointed as a High Sheriff, years ago you were told you can't take a holiday during your year because the monarch may die and you have a role to play. And you look at that role, and it's about reading the proclamation locally within the county, which is the only way you could communicate before the internet or before telephones or televisions. So it was just an announcement made. And you look at it and think, well, that's not going to happen to me, and you put it aside. But it did happen to me, and I had to get involved in it. And being involved in that process of reading the proclamation, exactly the same proclamation that was read in St James's Palace a day before I did it in Newport, just to think you're part of history. They've been around for 1,000 years. The last time it was done was 70 years ago. So you have to think that's the highlight of the year. But it's not really a highlight because it's such a sad occasion. But also, it was a joyous occasion because we have a new king now. So I've had a fantastic year. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I've got a month left, and I can do things in that month. If you want me to, that would be great. But the relationship with Torvine in particular has been outstanding, which is great because I live in Torvine, and therefore it brings it home to me that I'm doing something locally. So thank you for listening to me. And if there's any questions, fine, but I'm sure you've got plenty of business to get on with asking me anything. But you can, it's up to you.
Thank you very much. Do anybody have any questions? Any questions for the High Sheriff? No. Can I just thank you very much for your attendance, and thank you for your interest in Torvine and the work that you do. You need to be thanked for that, because you're doing a tremendous job, as does all the other High Sheriffs. Thank you very much. You're welcome to stay, but you're welcome to leave as well. We have a long agenda today.
Yeah, I will take my leave. I'm off to see Icelandic horses, of all things, so I better go. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oops, wrong.
Leader, have you finished your report? Councillor Burnett has his raised hand. He wants to come in with a question. Thank you very much. Councillor Burnett?
Thank you, Chair. No, it's only to echo the leader's thanks to Nancy, and as I'm the Chair of Democratic Services, she has been the backbone of that committee, as well as her team, and I just can't thank her enough. And I know we're all going to miss her as members. I mean, Nancy is what I call a stalwart, and I just want to thank her personally anyway, and I'm sure members appreciate everything she's done. And a happy retirement, Nancy. I'm sure you'll find plenty to do. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sure all members echo the leaders and your. Thank you. Chief Executive, do you have any announcements to make?
Well, just one, and again, it's just a thank you to Nancy on behalf of the Council, and for me personally for helping me settle in, Nancy, and for being really supportive over the past 18 months or so. And I know how well respected, how well thought of you are amongst the workforce. So thank you for your personal support and for your many, many years of service, and well done, and congratulations and good luck going forward.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Nancy. Thank you, members. Takes us to agenda item 9, which is the budget 2023-24 and medium-term financial plan, starting on page 35. Nigel Aurelius, the Deputy Chief Executive, could you deliver this report, please?
Thank you, Presiding Member. This time last year, we reflected on setting a solid budget following a significant increase in funding from the Welsh Government. A budget that had an element of contingency to cover COVID recovery and pay, which also allowed the Council to make a forward commitment at that time on the level of council tax. It was hoped that as the pandemic receded into history, that the years of austerity were perhaps behind us, and so with continued increases in funding, we could start to improve the resilience of public services. Indeed, I concluded at the time last year that whilst there are many challenges ahead, and although the forward outlook on funding is not so good, we can move forward with a more positive outlook than perhaps we thought in March and April 2020. However, the backdrop to this, my 17th budget, is significant inflation, particularly in respect of energy, and a cost of living crisis. Public services, and in particular local authorities, are key to helping communities survive these times. So far from the calmer waters we thought we may be heading into, we have had a lot of turbulence and challenge to navigate. As a sector, we have again received significant financial support from the Welsh Government, which was not expected at the level we eventually received, and that has certainly helped with the final proposals that are before you today, especially so following the uplift for the current financial year. As the budget was concluding, I reflected again on the fact that I've been Treasurer through the financial crisis of 2008, the years of austerity that followed, a pandemic, and now an era of steeply rising inflation and cost of living challenges. Before we turn to the detail of the 23-24 budget, it is worth saying a few words about the current financial year and the decisions made this time last year, which have significantly improved our position. As members will know from Cabinet reports, our current budget monitoring for 22-23 shows a healthy positive position as we approach the year end, which will help our overall financial standing. Additionally, because of decisions made as part of the budget this time last year, in not committing all our resources on a recurring basis, we have been able to fully mitigate the agreed pay awards. Therefore, we enter the challenges of 23-24 in a positive position. Turning now to the budget of 23-24. Clearly, any budget and medium-term financial plan contains a range of assumptions that are often difficult to make, and a lot essentially comes down to informed judgment. The papers before you are based upon the provisional settlement, as the final settlement will not be received until later today. But we are not expecting any material changes. The only change is likely to be in relation to fire, which will be a transfer of responsibility in. In other words, our settlement will rise, but so will the levy. Estimate preparation and the initial shortfall were undertaken as normal. However, at a very early point in the process, energy inflation and our approach to it was discussed. It was my recommendation to leadership and the executive that this year would be one to consider using reserves to mitigate the impact of energy inflation in 23-24. It seemed anomalous to me to cut services when we didn't know whether the increase was a spike or a curve and how steep that curve may ultimately be. I have always advised against using reserves to underpin spend which could be recurrent in nature, but this was one instance where I thought it was justified. I'm now going to briefly introduce the budget, its construct and conclusion, together with some commentary as your Finance Director on our overall financial standing and financial prospects. In your Council papers, you have, starting on page 35, the overall covering report on the budget. This includes the statutory recommendations, which I'll come back to. You then have the budget book report as Appendix 1, which has 5 annexes, being the budget mitigations, being the trail from the current year, being the detailed budget, and being the updated medium-term financial plan, and for the first time, a glossary of terms, which arose out of one of the scrutiny meetings. You then have 5 more appendices: property bandings, council tax by band, the equality impact assessment summary, the environment policy, capital strategy and prudential indicators. I'll come back to the covering report and formal recommendations, but we'll now briefly go through the budget book report and annexes on page, which start on page 47. Section 3 of that report once again takes members through the story of the budget. Initially, we had a first draft gap of some 12.5 million, which was probably our most significant at that stage of the budget and a reflection of the challenges posed by inflation. We then thoroughly reviewed the estimates, explored reserve usage, as I've already commented upon, looked at mitigation and alternatives, and these are all listed in Annex 1. These obviously brought the gap down, and then we received the provisional settlement, which was an increase of some 7.56%. We were just below the Welsh average of 7.9%, and significantly in excess of the forwarding assumption we were working to, and some 6.5 million more in monetary terms. Combined with the mitigations in Annex 1, we are now in a position of headroom, albeit that's with significant reserve usage still assumed. In terms of that headroom, the proposals are outlined in paragraphs 3.5 and 3.6, but our biggest consideration was pay. The Minister made clear once again in the narrative that accompanied the settlement that pay awards were a matter for us given the overall increase. Given the current turbulence in industrial relations, therefore it is recommended that our overall pay assumption should be increased, and the majority of the remainder should also be held in a general pay contingency. We said at the time if the latter was not needed, then the call on reserves would be reduced. In light of the very recent pay offer, that caution in also maintaining a general pay contingency appears sensible. The overall approach, and certainly the early decision to utilise reserves to cushion energy, stabilise a difficult situation. Paragraph 3.7 contains the budget, and 3.9 details what the budget buys. Annex 2 again highlights the movement between years. The next part of the report outlines our medium-term financial plan, in summary with the fuller detail within the appendix. Once again, planning has in part been assisted because of forward indications for 24-25 that accompany the settlement. The other assumptions made are articulated, and we believe them to be prudent and realistic assumptions, not worst case. It does not help planning if we merely just assume the worst. The revised MTFP has a financial challenge of 27.2 million to be addressed over 4 years, with a challenge of 10.6 million in the first year, which is inflated because of the need to address the reserve usage from 23-24. That reserve usage cannot be replicated without a significant impact on our financial standing, and it will not be recommended going forward. There is in place a strategic programme, Project Apollo, aimed at taking cost out in a thematic and cross-cutting way, so avoiding salami slicing percentage reductions approach. The settlement of 2023-24 has given us time to do this in a measured way, and we must and intend to take that opportunity. It is being driven with urgency. The themes are demand management, early intervention and functional redesign, digital transformation, administration, income generation, partnership working, and reducing energy use, reducing our building estate and changing the culture of their use. In terms of an indicative timeline, which was another recommendation from scrutiny, we need to get all the initial financial and service scoping completed, March and April 2023, detailed business cases, April 23, some member engagement, the executive and scrutiny, May 23, detailed implementation plans agreed, June 23, and implementation from June 23 onwards, and certainly full delivery of any proposals that impact on 24-25 by the 31st of March 24. The next section of the report goes into our reserves and reserves policy. We've never enjoyed high levels of reserves as an authority, and in the past they have come under pressure to address in-year demand and service range proposals. We have always resisted using reserves to any significant level to underpin recurring spend. I have already commented on why that is different this year. The figures within the report are based on current performance and monitoring. Paragraphs 5.3 and 5.4 detail the reserve levels. We have taken the opportunity to reclassify some reserves, including folding some previously earmarked reserves, corporate reserves, into the general fund. In doing so, paragraph 5.5 outlines an operational level and authorised level for the general fund as part of strengthening the overall stewardship of our reserves. Obviously, if monitoring allows, the opportunity will be taken at the year end to improve our financial standing as appropriate and mitigate the risks. The next section is our capital position and programme, and then section 7 details some risks that we need to be mindful of. Returning now to the covering report starts on page 35. In paragraph 3.2, I detail my professional responsibility in terms of reporting on the adequacy of the budget, adequacy of reserves and contingency plans. The report and papers discharge that, and I have already commented upon the level of reserves and the exceptional use in 23-24. Paragraph 4 then takes members through the council tax information based upon an increase for Torfaen of 1.95%. Our banding now stands at £1,477.44. Council tax only funds 16% of our budget, but the overall yield is still significant at 50.6 million. Paragraphs 4.4 and 4.6 show the impact of precepts, both in respect of community councils and the police. The next section then covers the outcome of the equality impact assessments on our proposed mitigations, and that is followed by commentary on our various resourcing strategies, our environment policy, and the capital strategy and prudential indicators. In respect of the latter, this was considered at January's Governance and Audit Committee. The recommendations then start on page 42 and in 4 parts. First, to approve the budget. 2, the statutory recommendations in relation to the budget and council tax. As indicated earlier, the budget is based upon the provisional settlement. The final is due this afternoon and will largely only change refire, with a transfer in of resource which will be matched by a consequent increase in the fire levy. So if the figures in 9.1 were based upon the final, they would increase in A and C, that's expenditure, and also E, which is income. But they'll have no impact on the calculated council tax. There's some updates in relation to supporting plans and then the capital strategy prudential indicators. As is the case when the budget concludes, I'd like to put on record some thanks. Firstly to Dave Lilly and Dave Weaver, or as the Daves as they seem to become collectively known these days. I'm not sure that that's grammatically correct, but that's what they're known as. Without whose support and professionalism, the Council would not have a budget to consider. To their colleagues in financial services, and particularly the lead finance officers, this has been another real challenge, and our financial services division have been at the forefront as to whom we meet those challenges. Deb Smith and Revs and Benz, they're not directly related to the budget, but they've been to the fore financially and administering many of the welfare and grant schemes to assist with cost of living. My colleagues, strategic directors and their teams for the support in once again developing this budget. Their support is, as always, very much appreciated. I say it every time, but collective responsibility and discipline remains a real strength of this organisation. Tom Roberts and his colleagues in respect of the overview and scrutiny of the budget. Thank you, Presiding Member. The Executive Member will now make some comments following which happy to take questions.
Deputy Chief Executive, Councillor Morgan, please.
Thank you, Presiding Member, and thank you to our Assistant Chief Executive, Nigel Aurelius, for that comprehensive and clear introduction to the proposed budget for 23-24. I want to start by paying tribute to the financial management that's already been exercised in the current financial year. A level of discipline and professionalism that has seen the Council deliver within its budget and create some headroom for the year that is to follow. Torfaen has a justified and an enviable reputation for corporate working and a whole authority responsibility for both prudence and efficiency, and I'm proud of it. But this united and consistent financial culture didn't just happen. It's been built over many years, and it's maintained in no small part due to the expert stewardship of our Treasurer and his team, and I'd like to join Nigel in his appreciation of all those he's mentioned. But I want to stress just how much we've achieved in setting one of the lowest council tax increases in the UK at a time of rampant inflation and huge economic uncertainty. Despite the Tory government's determined efforts to shipwreck the UK economy, as though a pandemic, war in Europe and a significant energy crisis weren't enough, Torfaen has been able to sustain the vital services it delivers and provide significant support to struggling families and communities. And that's something we're all right to be proud of. You won't have heard panic-driven reactions from this council administration, not because the challenges aren't real, but because there's trust in the judgment of members and officers and a track record of calm and capable financial management. This council continues to set a course that prioritises the right things in the right way and with the right levels of funding to get the job done. The 23-24 net budget amounts to 222.8 million, and some of the things this budget has been able to deliver over and above maintaining existing services deserve a mention. We're able to continue our approved council tax reduction scheme, bringing some measure of financial relief to close on 10,000 households. We're able to uplift revenue funding to our schools community by 4.3 million, or 6.2%, plus one-off support of 600,000. We're able to enable employers to pay the living wage of £10.90 per hour, an increase of 10% over the 22-23 rate for care workers working in the care sector, the very least that they deserve. We're able to increase funding to in-house provision of domiciliary adult social care and supported living activities. We're able to support placements for children looked after with relatively low levels of additional funding. We're also able to provide modest funding that will enable the incredibly valuable Fair Share Food Bank support scheme to continue. We're able to continue to support the School Leaver Employment Scheme. And one of those things that sounds dull but is really very exciting and really important is we've been able to provide resource for a new Section 106 officer and planning software. I'd just like to mention, as I did at Cabinet previously, that those planning services that have been squeezed during years of austerity really do underpin so much that we do in the Council, and they're often hidden away. But I'm so pleased that we're able to provide that support. The big picture, let's not forget that we faced a very big gap when we first drafted our budget proposals. We're fortunate to have a government in Cardiff Bay that recognises the importance of local government services, but even with that unexpected uplift, this was a major headache. We had to take the decision to use reserves and not just the usual purpose of underpinning clearly non-recurring costs. But we've judged it right to use them to fund a level of inflated energy costs that we confidently expect to decrease from the current spike and flatten out into a more sustainable curve. But still there was a gap. Supported by some excellent work by members at scrutiny level, for which I thank the Resources Scrutiny Committee and its chair, the Council has done what it needed to do without putting further pressure on the budgets of families in Torfaen. The mitigations that are presented in today's budget make smarter use of our resources and enable us to balance our budget and leave a small amount of headroom without cutting services. I feel the need to say that again. We closed the gap without cutting services and with only a minimum rise in council tax. There's more to do in the medium term, and Nigel has spelled out the key features of Project Apollo. Under the leadership of Anthony Hunt, Stephen, our Chief Executive, the Council as a whole, members and officers are coming together to ensure Torfaen stays ambitious for our people and communities, but lives within its means. We're not complacent about the challenges ahead. Our medium-term financial plan suggests a gap of 27.2 million over 4 years. Pay inflation and other uncertainties lie before us without any further recourse to reserves. But the skills and judgment that have brought us to today's favourable position will, I confidently believe, serve us well as we go forward. To everyone concerned, thank you. Madam Presiding Member, this may be an appropriate point for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Morgan, for that comprehensive review of our budget. I'm sure we have questions. I've got Councillor Sue Moulton on the first question.
Thank you, Rose. Thank you both for your intense report. Nigel, if I can come to you, could you please pass on my sincere thanks to your staff, to your officers that dealt with the budget, and not only that, we were in a pandemic with COVID-19. My personal view, we now have another pandemic on our hands. High cost of living. I'm quite aware of the staff within the council that are working with residents out there that are struggling with food, gas, electric. So please, would you take it back to all departments for their assistance and believing and committing themselves to helping those, our residents? Thank you both for your reports.
Thank you, Councillor Moulton. Councillor Burnett.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Again, it's just to thank Nigel and the team. Without naming more, Nigel has done that. As a council, we're so lucky to have this team that with one of the lowest in the country. On behalf of everybody, it's just a big thank you. It could have been a lot worse, and as Sue just said, there is another pandemic. The cost of living, we all know, the energy cost of food banks. We just got to work together as a team, everybody, as this council. It's not any party. It's all working together as one to show the way. Let's hope we get there eventually. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Burnett. Councillor Nathan Yowell.
Thank you, Madam Presiding Member. Again, I'd like to echo what other members have said, and I'd like to thank senior officers in the Cabinet for all their hard work preparing this budget. Again, to repeat what's already been said, I think the financial backdrop of the last 12 months, what with inflation, with the raging cost of living crisis, and the ham-fisted attempt by Liz Truss to try and blow up the economy last September, midway through the year. It's been really tough for everybody in Torfaen, and I think all of us can take actually real pride in what's been achieved with this budget today, because actually, as Sue's already said, this is one of the lowest council tax rises, not just in Wales, but across the entire UK. And I think that's something we can definitely take some pride in. And to add a bit of politics, it fulfils Labour's pledge at the election last year that we would keep council tax rises beneath 2% this year and next year. So I think that's a very good thing. Alongside that commitment last year, all of the Labour members in this chamber campaigned up and down the borough on a commitment to lend a helping hand to those neighbours and our communities when they needed it. So basically, the question I've got for whether it be for Councillor Morgan or for Nigel, is can you please set out what council tax, in a bit more detail, what council tax and other exemptions and reductions we're putting in place and maintaining through the next 12 months to ensure that we will always protect the most vulnerable residents across the borough?
Thank you, Councillor Yowell. Nigel, do you want to come in now?
The principal one is obviously in Wales we've got a 100% council tax reduction scheme, and about 9,600 of our residents benefit from that, so about 25% of our council tax payers. That isn't replicated in England, where it's delegated to individual local authorities. Some have hundreds. So I think that's our biggest. We will be having a leaflet going out with all the bills, again pointing where residents can get help and can get support. And obviously all the other discounts are still in place, single person discount and all of those. what level of extra support the Welsh Government are going to provide over and above that, we haven't seen sight of anything further. But those are the principal ones.
Thank you. Sue, did you want to comment or is that?
No, that's fine, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Alan Slade.
Thank you, Chair. It's evident once again that the Welsh Government seem to be giving us a good settlement with the one hand, but continue to reduce service-specific grants with the other. And there are clearly going to be challenges over the next 5 years. But having said that, I am encouraged that there's a modest council tax increase this year and sensible increases planned over the next 5 years. I'm also encouraged that mitigations have been targeted rather than a set percentage against all services, and there appears to be a focus on managing future demand and the cost of back office services. The strategy set out in this budget has given me some encouragement that the right areas are being looked at for future potential savings, so consequently, for the first time in many years, I will be supporting the budget. Thank you.
Councillor Stuart Ashley.
I'm encouraged by this budget as the lowest settlements there was. I also like to thank all those members, thank officers, by the way, for producing, helping us produce a scrutiny report where the comment was in agreement, and thank all members that contributing to the scrutiny process where it was actively encouraged by the report. And thank to the executive member for recognising that the scrutiny process contributed to this. It's not easy to scrutinise this, and it's getting harder and harder. And I recognise it as a very active process. Thank backbench members for doing scrutiny. It's not, not easy when we come to this fresh. I recognise it's members' first budget. And thank Nigel for his clear, and Nigel and his team for his clear help on the scrutiny process, because I think members got a lot out of that. Thank you very much indeed, Nigel, for this report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ashley. Councillor Carl Gordon.
Yes, thank you, Presiding Member. I mean, we've been through a hell of a year with energy costs and all the rest of it, and as Councillor Mawson said, we've effectively been through another pandemic. So to present a balanced budget within the commitment we made last year, I think we do need to not quite pat ourselves on the back, because it's still an increase for our residents. But I think, being amongst the sort of lowest rises in the UK is something to be proud of, I think. And I'd echo the comments that we made about the sort of officers and Nigel and his team for the work they've done. But there's another strand of work the council's on with at the moment, and that's the climate emergency, isn't it? And reducing our sort of overall energy consumption can save both money from the council budget, and it does reduce our carbon footprint. And we've got that net zero commitment within the council. It's good to see the council sticking to it, because the UK government seem to have changed their mind after COP26 and have cooled their heels a little bit, and they're not quite as committed perhaps as Torfaen are. My question centres around largely what increased provision have we got for sort of things like EV, electric vehicle charging points, and electrification of the council fleet, and any other measures being taken within the budget or proposed going forward to sort of stick to our net zero commitment. Thank you, Presiding Member.
Thank you. Do you want to answer that? Councillor Owen?
Yeah, thanks, Carl, for that. I know members scrutinised the growth pressures back in the autumn in scrutiny, and it's always a hard balance to go further and to do a bit more when things are so tight. But we have increased our EV charging in council premises through grant funding. We've put charges in the highway in Crossy and our T-Blind, where we use it for our council vehicles, which include our 2 new electrical refuse vehicles, and we've also got an environmental health vehicle which we use to pick up stray dogs, don't we? So we've also carried out a robust assessment for the fleet for the future, and through grant funding, Western Power has been instructed to install a new substation in T-Line, which will ensure that all future electrical fleet can be electrified. So, because there's no point in having or buying electrical vehicles if we can't charge them. So, we're also going to be looking at a comprehensive fleet strategy going forward, which we will bring to all members. But at the moment, all our fleet are leased, so any costs for replacement and revenue costs will be included in the MTFP going forward. I don't know whether Rachel wants to come in and add anything.
Thanks, Councillor Owen. I just think just to build on what's been said, there is, some of our fleet is very difficult to convert to EV at the moment, particularly some of the, such as our gritters and the large sweepers. The market is still very immature. We're sort of in this VHS Betamax discussion. Is it going to be hydrogen? Is it all going to be EV? We do now have an EV officer funded through the MTFP last year. So thank Council for that investment. And his job is to, in part, look at our internal transformation of our fleet, EV, hydrogen, whatever it is for the future, but also the rollout of EV and also sort of sustainable transport charging in our communities. So expect a lot to come forward to members over the next 12 months. And as Councillor Owen has said, our fleet is primarily leased, which is a revenue implication. And as we work through replacement programmes, that will then be worked through in terms of individual budgets and reflected in future MTFPs. So it is something we're committed to. We've got to do it as part of our climate change emergency. And also it is the best thing in terms of service delivery. Okay, so thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. Leader, you wanted to come in on this point?
Yeah, very much welcome that work that's been outlined by Mandy and Rachel there, both the EV officer, the local work being done on charging and the fleet progress that's being made. Also at a regional level, I think we need to continue and redouble our efforts on EV charging. We won't always be the solution in and of ourselves, but if we can catalyse the market to help resolve some of the EV charging dilemmas that we have, then I think that would be very much a worthwhile thing. There's, of course, particular challenges in valleys communities with EV charging and with often very tight terrace streets. I think there's a challenge in particular in the new town of Cwmbran, where often people park away from their houses as opposed to having cars parked within their own sort of house footing. How we try and tackle those, I think, is going to be essential if we're to move away from combustion engines towards some kind of EV type solution from 2030 onwards. And I think the urgency and the scale of our regional ambition needs to reflect that.
Thank you. I call in Councillor Jason O'Connell. Welcome back.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Nice to be back. Excuse my husky voice as I battle a cold. But I just wanted to say that this is a very good budget. It's easy to pick holes as opposition, but the people of Torfaen should be, I think, welcoming this. It's a very modest rise against what is an out-of-control cost of living crisis and inflation. And when you compare it to neighbouring authorities, I think done a very, very good job here for the residents, so thank you. I did have one question on the renewable energy and whether we'll see an impact on the bottom line in terms of cost of energy savings and so on when those investments are realised. Thank you.
Nigel's looking to me.
Yeah. Rachel.
I think actually that the biggest investment we've got going this year is on the school estate with the 14 planned PV panels, and for the life of me I haven't got the modelling in front of me, but there is a significant payback in terms of then the revenue bills the schools will pay will obviously then reduce the pressures coming forward into the MTFP. I like
in terms, so that's our biggest PV and renewable projects this year, and the team are just currently scoping out what else we're going to be doing. But if you want members on the schools one in particular, we can send around the modelling and the financials that you've asked for, Councillor Connell, afterwards to all members. Probably would be more interesting than me trying to black my way through it right now.
Very good. Thank you, Rachel. Councillor David Thomas.
Thank you, Madam Presiding Member. I'd just like to echo my colleagues' words, and I'd like to thank Nigel and his team on an excellent financial report, and they should feel extremely proud of the work they have done in this report. Nigel and his team will know that both Councillor Slade and I have engaged every year on the budget and have had a long history with our questions. So it's finally nice to see them sitting in full council and not looking so nervous this financial year.
I'm sure we're all very nervous still. Councillor Alfie Beth.
Thank you. I'd like to echo what everyone else has said. I think it's a great budget, and particularly I welcome the new inclusive and accessible play equipment at Pontypool Park and Cumbrae Boating Lake. I suppose my question is, how else does this budget support families, particularly during the cost of living crisis?
I mean, I think it partly goes to the answer to Councillor Yole in terms of, you know, we've been able to maintain the council tax reduction scheme, which will directly help residents who are struggling with their council tax. But I'd also, you know, talk about things such as the, you know, the fair share scheme, which we've been able to actually mainstream into the budget now, rather than it sitting outside, and things like increasing, you know, the increases to schools. You know, that schools are able to maintain a level of education provision. You know, and I go back to what I said in my opening remarks. We made a very early decision in conjunction with the schools to use balances to cushion energy. And that made a big difference to sort of stabilising the way we approach the budget. So, I mean, I think council tax reduction scheme, fair share scheme, increases to schools, the uplift in relation to the minimum wage within sort of, you know, the social care sector. You know, there's quite a range of things, I think, that help families.
Councillor Williams, Lucy Williams.
Yes, so first of all, I'd like to echo, with all my colleagues, echo my thanks for the incredible hard work with this budget. This is following on a little bit from my colleague's question, this is a little bit about understanding the detail around the funding to education. Great to hear that there's the funding for the renewable energy, for the PV panels. So I guess my question is a little bit more about understanding the detail, given all the budget pressures, about how schools are going to be able to access funding to be able to put in place the new ALN code specifically, and if they're able to access some of the capital funding that's available for that. So it'd be good to hear a little bit more detail about that.
I don't know whether we have anybody to answer that. Yeah. Nigel? Oh, Richard.
It comes under my portfolio, so I'll have a stab of that one. Even in the difficult times that we are and the way the budget has been set, I'm actually not surprised that education has been highlighted, not just because of the Estin inspection. I think we've got a very proud history as an authority, and our finance department, when money has come in, it has been passported to schools with very little topsicing that colleagues of mine throughout Wales complain about, and certainly teaching staff and others complain about. Rose and I both sit on the, and 2 minutes ago I could have told you what it's called, budget monitoring. There you are. See, that's why Rose sits on it, because she remembers the detail. And head teachers who sit on those as well actually congratulate us for the way that we treat schools and the way the money passports to school. Again, it's not surprised. It started with a lady called Marlene Thomas when she was the resources director, And it also shows how we actually act as a team across. It's not just education, it's a whole council approach. And I haven't even started to attempt to answer your question, Lucy, and I apologise for that. But in that all approach, we recognise the importance of education. I've mentioned Estin last year. One of the key features of the Estin findings was our approach to ALN. And the funding recognises that and will help us to deliver an ambitious strategy that we're out to consultation with at the moment, and more detail on the specific spending will follow that. And I'm just about to send out in the next couple of days the current newsletter. By the April newsletter, there will be more detail how that money will go into that ambitious strategy, and more importantly, supporting some of the most vulnerable learners that we've got. There is a capital formula which has been revised. With any formula, whether it's local government, whether it's education, whether it's what have you, there's winners and losers, and there's people who are upset by it and people who are happy with it. But it provides the provision for all of our schools to have access for the additional needs that are required. You've heard the energy ones already mentioned, and the reserves coming out of, the money coming out of reserves to cover the demands on schools. So I think we've got a proud record of investing in our schools over and above what we get, and how that affects individual pupils. At a later stage, and I haven't had a question from Councillor Thomas for a while, but I'm sure I will in the not-too-distant future. But before that, I would hope to come back to you with a roundup of what we are doing in terms of Estin and how our schools are improving and the partnership approach that we are taking with that. But thank you for your question.
Thank you.
Thank you. I've got three more speakers lined up. Councillor David Williams, Councillor Chris Stewart and Councillor Elizabeth Haynes. I'll call those three and that'll be the last on this debate, I think. Is anybody else wishing to come in before it? And the leader will finish up. Thank you very much. Councillor David Williams.
Thank you very much, Madam Presiding Chair, and I'd echo the thanks that have been expressed by all councillors so eloquently to the work that's been done to prepare this budget. It's really just a relatively minor sort of forward-thinking bit, I suppose. We've made clear, and Nigel has expressed it a couple of times, the provision of significant resource to enable delivery of the real living wage for care workers. And this is obviously very positive given the failure actually at UK government level to actually take forward this social care service that's been promised in the past. But I think what I would be asking is, are there plans to actually improve the sustainability of our care services through more direct employment of staff rather than contracting out? And will this give us some attention and provision to do that?
David?
Thank you, Chair. I'm talking to someone with tremendous experience. I don't know if members knew Dave previously worked in adult social care, so I'll be very much drawing on Dave's experience going forward. In short, if you look in the county plan delivery plan, you can see that in Objective 3 we do have a commitment to reviewing it. I mean, I won't go on because members know my view on dom care and the sustainability of the market. You know, I have concerns. Whilst it is, as you've said, very welcome that the wage has risen to a real living wage, I think whether that bears out to stabilising the market and increasing the level of employment has yet to be seen. I'm at risk of sounding ungrateful, and I need to reiterate that it is a very good thing that we've risen that wage. But I do think that there are wider issues with the dom care sector that aren't something that we can do unilaterally. We've tried previously, I think some members may remember several years ago, we tried to take a very, very modest percentage in-house. I think it was something like 5-6% in-house, and we had to appeal to Welsh Government for a pilot to be able to do that. We were unsuccessful at the time. I think that things have changed significantly since then, so I think it's certainly worth looking at that again. I think that it is something that ultimately Welsh Government need to do, because we can't do it unilaterally in Torfaen, we can't do it unilaterally in Gwent. It needs to be a Wales-wide thing. It actually needs to be a UK-wide thing. You made reference there that, and you know, they've left the room now, but they would probably groan at me saying that the Tories just haven't grasped the social care crisis at all. They talked about it sort of superficially around raising national insurance to pay for it. Gone. I mean, I think that was superficial in the first place, but that's gone. And yeah, there seems to be nothing from a national level to indicate that they really grasp the scale of the crisis. And that is essentially what needs to happen, because in order for Welsh Government to do what needs to be done, to pass that, say, that money down to local authorities, to raise the wage, to take it in-house, as I believe it should be, we need it to be grasped on national level. It's perhaps unfair for me to attack the Tories when they're not in the room, not officially anyway. But yeah, that's my answer.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Chris Chu.
Thank you. We had a discussion at the independent group, and we will be supporting the budget. Thank you. And I'd like to thank Nigel and the Daves for all their hard work. Brilliant. Let's just hope there's a little bit of money left in the budget for a nice 5G pitch north of Pontypool. Thanks.
Is on there for the ALN. Thank you. Councillor Elizabeth Haynes, your light's been on or off. Do you still wish to speak?
No, pretty much everyone else has said what I was going to say, so it's pointless speaking for the sake of speaking.
Thank you. The leader will sum up, please.
Thank you, colleagues. I'd like to thank you for those constructive interventions and questions. I think that's a great sort of way to approach the budget going forward. In general, I think Carl made very good points about climate change and carbon reduction that I've responded to already. I'd like to thank councillors Burnett, Ashley, Haynes, Slade, Thomas, Chew and O'Connell for their recognition of the approach that's been taken to this budget, to Alfie for his question on accessible play equipment, which I think is, is great news and something I hope we can take forward in as many locations as possible, and to give all children the chance to play. Lucy pointed out the importance of funding for education, and very much welcome the extra money in the budget for our schools, also for ALN, which I think is important. David Williams on social care and the real challenge of sustainability, and for that sector in particular, which has been built for too long on a very unstable footing, that's fragmented and relies on low pay for people providing care to some of the most vulnerable people in our communities. I think that's a national challenge that we really need to address in the coming decades in hopefully a bipartisan way. I'm very much a believer in some form of national care service. I hope that's something that we can take forward. It won't come without some risks and some costs, but the risk and the cost of not doing anything, I think, is huge on that issue. The burden on the NHS from the fragmented and understrained care service that we have at the moment, I think, is huge, and that's something that we need to tackle in a holistic way, looking at the health system and not just the health service, and also how other services, for example, leisure, fit into that. Trying to keep our community as active and as independent as we can, so they're less reliant on acute health services, I think is a vital challenge of our age, as is climate change, which has been mentioned. To give Chris reassurance on 4G, I won't let that one lie. I hope we'll have some very positive announcements coming forward, working together with communities in the north on 4G, and that's something that I think this budget gives us the ability to take forwards and to try and get that funding together so that we can have proper provision throughout the borough for 4G pitches. As a football coach myself, I know the mad scramble there is for facilities at the moment, and that's something that we need to work on, partly because of the issue I've just explained about improving people's health and well-being. And just on that, just thank you to everyone who runs our community sports clubs across the borough. Boxing's been mentioned already today, but football, rugby and so many other sporting activities that people give up their time voluntarily to allow people to pursue. Just on comments of my own, I'd like to thank Nigel, Sue and colleagues for the calm and collegiate way this budget's been done. I think the prudent and stable response to a difficult situation isn't something that we should take for granted as members. It might not be the most sort of glamorous or headline-worthy approach, but I think it's the right one in the long term for the services that we provide. I think the considered and appropriate use of reserves to tackle the spike in energy costs is the right approach rather than passing that cost on to our residents. I think I would like to emphasise the big job of work that there is to do in the medium term, that we shouldn't just take that stability for granted. We've got, a very difficult outlook and turbulent times. I'm confident that the same approach will be the right one for services, to give the services the best possible chance in the medium and the long term. I think it's vital that we continue to protect those services, that we continue to try and protect those who work so hard to deliver those services, because at the end of the day we can't forget that public services, the services that we provide, are the sum total of the efforts of the staff that work for us as a council. I think that's vital to remember, and also to remember the job that we've got for the residents that we serve. I very much welcome the partnership approach from Welsh Government that's allowed this approach to work as a council. They've worked with us to try and address the funding shortfall, and I hope that our response has shown them that we can be trusted as a social partner to deliver for the services that we provide and for the people that we jointly serve. I very much welcome the extra money for our schools. The 4.3 million figure, the 6.2% has been mentioned. I think we're well on the way of our journey from near the bottom of the education funding league table to much nearer the top. And I think that's a recognition of the importance of the job that we're doing with our schools at the moment. And thank you to Richard and to Rose for their leadership on that in Cabinet and Scrutiny, respectively. I think that the efforts to deliver the real living wage is important. I think it's a social scandal that too many people who deliver vital public services in this country are paid near the bottom of the pay scale, right on the brink of the statutory living wage. I think it's great that in this council we deliver the real living wage to try and tackle low pay. I think the council tax reduction scheme for the 10,000 residents that rely on it is vital too, as well as our work to limit that council tax rise. Our rise of 1.95% will be around £28 extra for households given a Band D property. Just to think that would be £75, an extra £50 if we increased it by the 5% that national government seems to have as the standard. And it would be an extra £125 for each household if we were to increase it by 10%, which is still under the rate of inflation at the moment. So that's a real effort to recognise the cost of living issues that households have got, and to try and keep council tax as low as possible whilst protecting those services that I've mentioned. I think the support for domiciliary care and supported living is welcome, as is the support for looked after children in this authority, and thank you to colleagues who take that forward so diligently. I think the support for other vital community environmental services that Sue and Nigel have outlined is important as well. The Fair Share Cymru scheme has been mentioned. I think that's a great way that we started the pandemic to work with our community associations and food share schemes to try and help people through a difficult time. And I think it's right that we keep that going, given that, as Sue Melson said, the continuing issue of the cost of living. I think it's right that we make a reasonable assumption for pay for the hard-working staff that I mentioned. I remain concerned nationally about the sustainability of our workforce. We have what is an ageing workforce in local government now, and I think we need to attract in more people at the bottom end of that workforce, at the starting positions in authorities, to try and make that workforce more sustainable. But I very much welcome the approach that's been taken to this budget, and I heartily recommend it to fellow councillors.
Thank you, Leader. Thank you, members, for your very impressive debate this morning. The recommendations start on page 42 of the report. Can I ask members if they agree with the recommendations? Thank you. Are there any members against the recommendations? Nick Byrne is at a late hand, right? Thank you. Are any members wishing to abstain from the recommendations? Thank you. That report is carried. Thank you, Nigel and officers, for your contribution, as well as members. Takes us to agenda item 10, the Council Plan for 2022 to 27, the Delivery Plan 23-24, and this report starts on page 159. Stephen Vickers, Chief Executive, could you deliver this report, please?
Thank you, Madam Presiding Member. Very much building on the previous debate. The report sets out the delivery plan for 23-24 as part of the county plan for adoption by council. Members will recall adopting a new county plan in December 22. Our county plan focuses around 9 wellbeing objectives targeted at addressing health and social care inequality across the county, tackling the climate and nature emergencies, and improving how the council serves, supports and works with its residents and members. The county plan has been developed to encourage working together across the council on shared challenges. Common themes of connectivity, well-being, sustainability and culture and heritage will ensure that thinking and planning is focused around the big picture, and these themes then sit at the core of our policy making, planning and design of the future. Members will be aware that a new delivery plan highlighting key activity will be produced each financial year throughout the lifespan of the county plan. Each annual delivery plan will describe a set of activities and measures that will be used to assess the progress being made, delivering against our priorities and ambitions. This year, for the first time, the Council's delivery plan is produced alongside our budget setting, ensuring that delivery for the year ahead is appropriately budgeted for. Members will see that our delivery plan aligns activity directly to the Council's 9 wellbeing objectives. The plan is more focused, containing, I hope, the activity that members would expect to see us take forward in terms of our aspirations, such as improving educational attainment and our education programme, helping people into work, tackling the cost of living crisis, a new approach to working with communities, improving recycling rates and reducing our carbon footprint. Extensive engagement took place leading up to the publication of the county plan in December 22. This engagement activity has helped to shape both the existing and new delivery plan. Further engagement work will be undertaken in the year ahead as part of the process of reporting performance and developing our next delivery plan. Delivery plan will be monitored quarterly by the Council's leadership team. Cabinet will receive quarterly updates, with scrutiny receiving updates on a 6-monthly basis. Members and officers will then collectively keep delivery under review and will continue to shape the work of the future. I'd ask members to note that we are working on improving our performance reporting systems for the county plan further. A more sophisticated suite of performance measures are under development that will link the plan to a set of performance outcomes, enabling the Council to assess and track the impact that we are having on the wider wellbeing objectives and their delivery. So along with our strategic directors here, we'd be happy to receive any comments or take any questions from members. Thank you.
Members, do you have any questions? I've got Stuart Ashley and Stephen Evans on the leader.
Me first, is it?
Please, Councillor Ashley.
Yeah. I'd like to make comments on it. I've been through two sessions of scrutiny on it, and we started sort of with the Chief Executive explaining the county plan, then we went through it on scrutiny. I thank the Chief Executive for a clear process, and obviously we then examined the plan, and I've been on the end of it as well as the community councillor, and I like to say it is a process, and I hope this development plan that we're now getting presented with, it seems to be a relatively clear process, Chief Executive. And if you keep the way you are, community councillors are understanding this, and it's quite involved, but understandable, and certainly scrutiny got it. I think we started off with you presenting it, and then your officers doing. I like it actually, because it's got outcomes, which is the important bit. And this whole thing is about outcomes. Some of which we do in the past is, if we're going to do the delivery outcomes, then it's got to have meaning. Can you comment on that, please? Because that's the whole point of this, and I like the style of this And I think it's important that members understand this is going to deliver. Could you comment on that, if you would, please, Chief Secretary? I'll go back and see what on that.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Ashley. Yeah, it's designed to. Well, thank you for the compliments, actually, because it is designed to do exactly that you've said. It sets out 9 objectives. You can break them down actually into 3 parts, I suppose. There's 4 very much focused around place, 4 focused around people, and then 1 very much focused about the way that the council does its business to support communities, members, and residents, and just the way that we improve and become more effective and efficient. So it sets the county plan sets out that. The delivery plan then on an annual basis will set out a budgeted set of ambitions. I suppose the gap that we feel that's there that still needs to be filled, and this was what I made reference to at the end of my opening statement, is around ensuring that we've got very clear, as well as very clear deliverables and very clear, a very clear way of monitoring them. It's also to ensure that we've got a very clear way of assessing and understanding impact set against what are some really quite aspirational and very wide-ranging well-being objectives. But I think the fact that that people are understanding it is a really important thing for us, because that's the way that we would that's the way to get communities engaged in delivery, and we can't underestimate actually just how much we rely upon members and communities to help us to deliver our aspirations, and actually the only way that we'll get our way through the medium-term financial plan is to see this period, is to see this plan achieve its aspirations, quite frankly. So thank you all for those comments, and I hope that sort of covers that off.
Thank you. Councillor Steve Evans.
Thank you, President Member. I totally agree with what Stuart has said. It's an excellent plan. The only question I would like to ask, with our collaboration with other organisations, how are we signposting anything to do with a cost of living crisis? I mean, in my other role, what I do locally, it seems to be a lot of fragmented, trying to find the relevant information. So how would we collaborate all that to make it more successful than it already is?
Dave Leach is going to answer that for you.
Hi, Councillor Evans. Yes, thank you for that. So, as part of the county plan, we're setting out the first year's actions for our new communities approach that we're looking to take. And that's very much about how we build those networks up across those community groups. So I know we've had conversations around ones within your own ward and how we can support them to network and communicate better. The key thing for us there is getting that information out to those groups around what activities are taking place within their local area, and making sure that those groups are having conversations amongst themselves. So we've got that feeder in and we've got that feeder around the community. So there's some actions within the county plan that are specifically about setting up that network, what we're calling the Connect network for this year. So you should see improvements in the way that communities groups are communicating this year.
Thank you, David. Councillor Janet Jones.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Stephen, thank you very much for the concise and informative plan that you set out for us, and the actions which we hope will be adhered to and live up to the many expectations we as members have. Just thank you very much, and let's hope we can achieve all that we want to do.
Thank you. A comment from me before I bring the leader in. I think it's an excellent delivery plan, and it's good to see that it's aligned with the budget and that we have issues along dates along the time to follow the feedback. So thank you for that. Leader.
Thank you, Presiding Member, and very much welcome those contributions. I think Councillor Ashley's description of it as a process, not an event, is a good one. I think it'd be possible to have an excellent plan, but that just is a plan, isn't it? Unless it's an excellent system, it's not going to affect the way that we work as an authority. I think this has the makings of something that can get that excellent system together. I think Rose is quite right. This needs to be aligned with everything else that we do, and we need to have that cycle, don't we, of setting the objectives, making sure the actions correspond to those objectives, monitoring the outcomes, and then self-evaluation to continue that loop. So I think all those aspects are vital, and I'm really encouraged by the approach that's been taken in this report and that monitoring system that's been mentioned. I'm also pleased that the plan corresponds very closely with the aims and the ways of working of the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act as well. I think that helps everything tie in together and helps, to focus our minds on the longer term objectives that we share, rather than just, what happens today and tomorrow. So I think that's very important. But I'd like to thank officers for their hard work in getting this together across all departments, and Tom's team, as well as Stephen and his chief officers.
Okay, thank you, Leader. The recommendations are on page 162 of the report. Can I ask members whether they agree with the recommendations? Thank you very much. Are there any members against the recommendations? Are there any abstentions? Thank you for that. Thank you for the debate. That's carried. Takes us to agenda item 11, which is the Torfaen LDP, the Supplementary Planning Guidance, SPG, in brackets. And this starts on page 199. Adrian Wilcock, Principal Planner, could you deliver the report, please?
Thank you, Madam Presiding Member. The report before you today covers 3 supplementary planning guidance documents, which I'll refer to as SPGs, and I will explain each in turn. Also, why I am the report lead, my colleagues Leslie Groves from Housing, Rachel Stansfield and Richard Lewis from Planning are present here today to answer any more detailed questions you may have if needed. The first SPG is the Revised Planning Obligations SPG, often known as a Section 106 agreement associated with the grant of planning permission. That underwent a 6 weeks public consultation exercise in the spring of 2022, during which time we received several comments and detailed in the report for consultation Appendix 1. However, the SPG was delayed in returning to Council for several reasons, as explained in the report. However, we now have resolved those matters and have brought the SPG back to you at Appendix 3 for you with a recommendation for adoption, taking account of the comments made and the changes detailed in the report. The second SPG is the Site Design and Master Planning and Development Briefs SPG, which provides a clear set of guidelines regarding the assessment of a site's development potential to enable a place-making approach to site design. It is intended to be used for major planning applications and local development plan matters. This SPG recently underwent a similar consultation exercise, during which time we also received several comments, and a similar report of consultation is attached to Appendix 2. Again, this SPG, which is attached to Appendix 4, has been brought back to you today with a recommendation for adoption, taking into account the comments made and the changes detailed in the report. And finally, we are seeking your approval today to undertake a 6 weeks consultation on a new draft Sustainable Locations SPG, which is attached to Appendix 5. This SPG aims to provide a clear set of guidelines for the assessment of a potential development site's location. It will give appropriate weight to sustainability considerations and the national planning policy emphasis on reducing the need to travel and modal shift away from the motor car. It is intended to be used for all planning applications for new dwellings, including those relating to allocated sites, as well as replacement local development plan matters. As detailed above, this draft SPG will be brought back to Council with a report of consultation on any comments received for consideration alongside any recommended changes before a resolution is made for its adoption. Finally, I draw your attention to the report recommendations at paragraph 8.1. And because there's nearly 200 pages in the report, and we're going to leave it for detailed questions you may have. Thank you, Madam Presiding Member.
Thank you. Any questions? Joe?
Yeah,
And Stuart Ashley.
Thank you, Presiding Member. I just wanted to thank Adrian for presenting and the team as well for all the work they do on the obligations and guidance. So supporting adoption of the two reports will make a difference because it will maximise the number of affordable homes we have in new developments, and it would also enable the placemaking concept, which we know benefits our communities in terms of enhancing the environment and our community well-being. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gordon. Councillor Ashley?
Thank you for your presentation on this, Adrian. It's answered some questions I've asked you over the years, and you've not been able to give me certainly it mentions the Mononbrec Canal, residual canal through Torvine. It also mentioned it could do the landscaping and the archaeological stuff as well, because we've had questions in planning, certainly over stuff like Mamilad and other stuff that we've got in the boat. Because from what I'm seeing of this, and maybe you can answer the questions because you certainly have done. We've got archaeology in Torvine, but it's not the sort of stuff that's sexy in the sense that it would be in Monmouthshire or a Powys in terms of ancient stuff. But we've got things like the Mamilad site, which is amazing modern archaeology, as it were. One of the biggest modern buildings in Wales. So I'd be interested to hear how you intend to use this, because I mean the Mononbrec, for instance, as I think we've discussed in the past, has got potentially some of the biggest gradable buildings, series of structures in the area. So how would you and then landscape and various bits of buildings without the other stuff? How would you use these measures? I'm really fascinated, to be quite honest.
Thank you, Adrian.
Thank you, Councillor Ashley. I think part of it is the development management process deals with a lot of what you've talked about. So we can consult the Morgan Grant Archaeological Trust, conservation comments, things like that come forward. In terms of your question, which is about the supplementary planning guidance,
yeah,
and I guess it was that one. I mean, archaeology is normally recorded and kept, even though it's part of the supplementary in the section 106 of Mamilad, the whole point of the Mamilad application is to get better use of that listed building, and I think I know it's coming to you shortly.
Probably banging it. Sorry about that.
I know it's coming to you shortly, and under the 106 there, I think there are measures going to be put in place to make sure that enhancements to that building are made so it can be brought back into use. So that sort of deals with that. Landscaping, it's part of the open space annex, which I think is 6. I know we've got quite a lot of them and it's covered there. And I think we've also got a design guide on how to sort of landscape sites and sort of thirdly, the future SPGs you're going to hopefully see at June or July Council on green infrastructure and biodiversity will cover sort of landscaping and that, more details on that as well. Thank you.
But Chair, may I come back in very briefly? I forgot the obviously the nature and environmental stuff, which we do have quite a bit of, because I mean sitting in planning we got a lot of this stuff. But this just looks very, very, very useful, to be quite honest. Thank you very much, Adrian.
Thank you, Councillor Ashley. Councillor Alan Slade.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, you said yourself, this is an extremely long and detailed and complex report. It's just a comment, really. I'm a little disappointed that perhaps members could have had a seminar prior to receiving it, just to cover the bare bones. Thank you.
We'll take that on board, I think. Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor David Williams.
Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer. I think it's very helpful, obviously, that all of these things have been brought together in one place. And I think that really gives us a strong foundation in terms of the sort of forward planning, and I guess very much that's the intention, and will, I think, support both members and communities, and also, of course, applicants in terms of our sort of major developments. So I would just like to sort of say thank you for all the work that's gone into this, but I would echo the point that my colleague has made. I think a focused seminar would be quite helpful, particularly obviously for those members who don't necessarily sit on the planning committee. So hopefully that will be taken on board.
Thank you very much. Councillor Yowell, did you want to speak? No. Okay, thank you. Any other questions from any members? No, I thank officers. Thank you very much. Sorry. The recommendations are on page 209 of the report. Can I ask members whether they agree with these recommendations? Thank you. Are there any members against the recommendation? Are there any members that would like to abstain from the recommendations? As carried, thank you very much. Thank you, officers, for your attendance and your report. Takes us to agenda item 12, which is the Park Celyn petition response, which starts on page 383. Rachel Jowett, Strategic Director, Economy and Environment. Could you deliver this report for me, please?
Thank you, Presiding Member. Good morning, members. In October, Councillor Hames, on behalf of Mr James Miller, submitted a petition requesting that the Council adopt the publicly accessible recreational areas on the Park Celyn development. It is with regret that I am proposing that we have to reject this petition. The report outlines the planning process that was followed for this strategic development site. I need to stress to members that at no stage during the planning process did the Council refuse to adopt, as the developer of the site made it clear from the beginning that they did not want to put the site forward for adoption. Therefore, the management plan for the open space was subsequently submitted to Planning Committee for consideration. Over the last decade, there has been a growth, not just in Torfaen, but in the UK, that developers are not putting parks, recreation areas, etc. forward for adoption. Instead, once the development is complete, they pass responsibility onto management companies for the management of the sites, and they in turn impose a charge onto each householder, and this is allowed in legislation. And I will say this payment is on top of council tax. The supplementary planning guidance, which we've just reviewed, which informs and advises on adoption on such things such as roads, street lights and recreation areas, makes it clear that the Council will consider adoption and would require suitable and reasonable recompense as part of the Section 106 agreement. I would stress we have no powers, even at planning stage, to force a site to be adopted, but clearly that can be part of the Planning Committee deliberations in terms of the overall application. This and the future arrangements for the management of the site should have been made clear on the point of purchase by both the developer and also the solicitors for the purchasers themselves. In fact, it is our view that adoption would indeed be preferable. For example, we recently took a report through Cabinet, which members are all engaged in over the autumn and winter, on changes to biodiversity and grass cutting, and these sites are going to be excluded from those strategies and, for example, will not be improved and enhanced in line with Council emerging strategy, and we think that's a shame. With regards to council tax, the request for reduction is just not possible, and working with finance colleagues, obviously, you've just approved the budget. Council tax is not broken down into component services for each householder. It is not a service charge for particular services. There is sympathy for the residents on any antisocial behaviour that has been experienced. The report advises that the Community Safety Team undertook a survey to determine next steps, and only one response was received. I've been made aware since report publication that some residents were not aware of the survey. I've engaged with the Community Safety Team, and they advised they only sent a limited survey to properties adjacent to the park to determine severity before determining next steps. As only one response was received and there were no further reports from the police or other residents, no further action was taken. They will always maintain they will undertake further action and monitoring should further complaints come forward or further issues arise in that area. The petition also makes references to the differences to those who reside in housing association properties, and paragraph 4.10 explains how Bronavon manage it locally to provide clarification to the petitioners. In paragraph 4.12, the report then outlines why the Council cannot insist on adoption, and I've already touched on this earlier and explained to members what our supplementary planning guidance requires if a developer wants to put forward a site for adoption. When the report was published, we believed that the developer would not be amenable to open discussions on adoption, and I can confirm this position is the case, as we formally heard from Taylor Wimpey after the report was publicised. The following reasons they gave were: every contract with homeowners would need to be reopened and renegotiated, a costly exercise and would require 100% participation and a cost to each householder as well as the developer to change their legal agreements. They have a contract with the management company and there would be numerous contractual issues involved in unwinding that agreement, and they'd be reluctant to do so. And they also do not want to enter into a Section 106 negotiation with the Council on how much we would then require to take the site on. Unfortunately, this has become widespread practice, and in light of this in 2020, Welsh Government undertook a survey to explore the issues that were being faced by residents living on these developments, and I've attached the link to the summary of responses within the Welsh Government report in paragraph 4.14. We engaged WLGA to determine where Welsh Government were with this project, because it had gone very quiet, and they've advised that Welsh Government are working with UK governments to improve the monitoring and performance of these management companies through new legislation, similar to licensing conditions. At the moment, these are unregulated, so things such as charges, performance, quality are not overseen to ensure they are unreasonable. I propose in the recommendations that the Executive Member write to Welsh Government to outline the case of Park Celyn and push for an update and emergency on the recommendations from this project that they initiated back in 2020. Therefore, members, whilst there is utter sympathy with the residents, our hands are tied on this one. As a council, we can't force adoption, we can encourage it, and we will continue to do so with any planning applications coming forward. Therefore, I propose the petition is rejected, but that I meet with residents and the ward member to explain this, and also we write to Welsh Governments to progress for legislative reform. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. Councillor Haynes.
Thank you, Presiding Member. Just a couple of points, really. Points of accuracy, the spelling of my name in 3.1 and 3.3 is not correct. Also in 3.3, it tells of historic antisocial behaviour on site, and this antisocial behaviour continues to this day. The damage caused to the park and other bits by mainly the general public from outside of the estate is being paid for through this roof tax, and only residents of the Park Celyn site pay for that. And this just doesn't seem fair. I'm aware of other sites throughout the borough that this happens to. 4.4, on the top of page 4, it's good to see that the council is acknowledging how residents feel. In 4.6, it states that the community safety team have only had one complaint, but residents have consistently logged and complained to the police and the PCSO. I've multiple pieces of evidence to prove this. Again, in 4.6, it states about the council sending out surveys, and I note the verbal update that Rachel has given. But I posted this agenda on the site's, the Park Celyn site's dedicated social media page, and I've had so many replies stating that they've not received the survey. So can this survey maybe sent out to a wider audience in the estate, or even an electronic version be sent to me so that I can post it to the social media page so that we get an accurate response to that survey. 4.8, well, the response from the police is staggering, that they've only, they have very limited complaints, because I've got evidence of many. 4.9, it mentions about the fire in the park, and it's just one of many issues taking place on site. Again, look at the resident social media page, and that can be evidenced. On to 4.13, the developer's response is disappointing, but I'm not surprised. But I do, I do appreciate that without their agreement and the financial Section 106 money, that the council cannot cannot agree to this because they have no powers to force it. 4.14, 4.15, I really look forward to seeing what Welsh Government intend to do about this unfairness, because it is unfair. So I have referred the petitioner on to the Assembly member, but I believe that the estate residents might also be able to set up a management company and self-manage it, and that's an option that potentially is open to them. And finally, I'd like to thank the officers for what has been an extensive piece of work. Council could have quite easily dismissed the petition with a simple, "It's not in our power" answer. So I'm grateful for the time and effort put into this reply, and I'm particularly grateful to Rachel Jowett for meeting with me to discuss this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Haynes. I don't see any others wishing to speak. Thank you, Rachel. Do you want to come back on that, or are you happy to?
Just to apologise to Councillor Haynes for my misspelling.
Yeah, we apologise for the spelling of Haynes in the report, so thank you for that. The recommendations are on page 389 of the report. Can I ask members whether they agree with the recommendations? Thank you. Can I ask members if there are anyone against the recommendations? And any abstentions from those recommendations? Oh, thank you very much. That's carried. Takes us to agenda item 13, which is the expansion of Crownbridge School, Cumbran, and the award of the construction phase, which is on page 393. We do have some declarations of interest, but they're happy. Okay. Okay, Rachel Jowett, Strategic Director, Economy and Environment, could you deliver this report, please?
Thank you, Presiding Member. Members, this report is to approve the additional capital allocation on the contract for the expansion of Crownbridge School. As we've just approved the county plan, this is actually number 2 in the county plan that you've just approved, and we will raise education attainment and help young people and adults gain the qualification and skills needed to lead positive lives. As members will well know, Crownbridge is indeed one of our jewels in our education system. The school was built to take 80 children, but due to demand, they currently have just over 90 pupils attending. The report to Cabinet in 2020 made a strong business case that the capital cost of out-of-county placements could be used to fund an extension and ensure most of our vulnerable learners could be educated in county, which is far better for them and also for their families. The extension will allow the creation of a further 50 spaces, taking it to formally 130. Importantly, members, in light of questions on the budget, the new extension will be net zero carbon in operation, which is now a requirement of the additional Welsh Government funding that has been sourced. The project was developed over the COVID period, and due to the constraints of the site, but also the mad inflation pressures which we've seen in the construction market, the estimated price plus the new requirement for the net zero carbon work to be undertaken, it did lead to delays, and also there have been increases to the cost of the contract. However, we now have a way forward. This report seeks approval to let the build contract for the sum of 10.4 million and also approve a further 2.9 million as outlined in paragraph 8.1 from the Council's capital allocation. I can assure members that this capital allocation was just identified in the budget that you've just approved in paragraph 6.1 on page 55 of the report. So we are joining things up. It is estimated the new extension will be ready for new intake of pupils in September 2024. So just really recommend this report to Council.
Thank you, Rachel. Are there any comments? Jane? Councillor Watkins?
Thank you. I just wanted to say what a valuable resource Crownbridge School is to Torfaen. Prior to becoming a councillor, I worked in schools, I worked in the education system, and I know what a great resource Crownbridge School is. I also know that they work incredibly hard with the pupils with additional learning needs that they have there and their families. So I'm very pleased to see that we're going to be expanding this resource.
Councillor Watkins, can I echo Councillor Watkins' comments? They do a fantastic job down at Crown Bridge. It's a fantastic facility at the moment, but to have an extension on it, I'm sure it will help a lot of our students. And that, talking about students, they do a fantastic job within our community as well. So thank you for that. I've got Councillor Janet Jones wishing to speak, and Councillor Stuart Ashley. Councillor Jones, your microphone's on.
Just to endorse the comments, I'm really pleased that the expansion is going to take place. It's a vitally important service, and I commend Council for achieving this.
Thank you. Councillor Ashley?
In my scrutiny chair career, when it was just plain resources committee, we went round Cranbridge, and I was absolutely astounded by the number of measures that were in that school. I know we're building Maindy. I know we're putting stuff like that. Are you continuing the tradition in that school? The heat retention in the swimming pool was one of them. There were lots of other measures that were apparent. Your staff monitoring there. Obviously, it's an amazing building to cope with the ANN students it's got there, but the actual capability of the school to do things that I've never seen in a school before. Other schools now in the borough echo this, but obviously with the specialist facility it was the first school I've ever seen like that. I just wondered what they were going to put in the extension. Obviously, I think the time I went round there was nearly 10 years ago, so I would expect some further measures in there. I haven't seen the detailed report of what they're putting in the school, but I'd be interested to know what they're putting in there. Do you know, Rachel?
Yeah, Councillor Ashley, with your approval, I'll do a briefing round to all members about what is going to be entirely in the extension. I think that'd probably be, so we can make it comprehensive then.
I know when we went round there, the heat retention in the swimming pool was quite an amazing thing. Also, your officers were monitoring. It was stuff that I'd never seen before, and in that sort of stuff is what we would like to see in other schools. But Cranbridge particularly had it because they designed it from bottom up, and as I said, we've got other schools doing it now. That sort of stuff, echoing what we discussed in the budget, was also, in our buildings, was remarkable.
Thank you, Councillor Ashley. Councillor Lucy Williams.
Thank you. And thank you very much, Rachel, for this sort of clarity in why there has to be such an increase in the capital spend. I think what I find particularly important to highlight in this report is the fact that this is going to enable us to bring back into our county those children who currently are being educated out of county. I think that very much falls in with our general desire to bring all our complex families within, and there's a clear long-term financial implication, but even more importantly, for our families who need those extra needs, it means that they can stay within their own locality, build their own social networks, and I don't think you can put a price on that. So I think that core reason of bringing our children back to where they live is really crucial. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Can I say it's a fantastic facility? I know Richard Clark wants to come in there, but any members having the opportunity to take a look around should take up that opportunity. Councillor Clark.
I think I referred to the team approach, and Rachel's involvement and her team's involvement in this typifies it, where we all pull together for education. God, haven't we come a long way from when I started with the council, where this facility was based in the Wern in Griffithstown, Sebastopol. It's, it was, well, not barbaric, barbaric's the wrong word, but the provision that we offered students then, as opposed to what we have since the opening of Cranbridge in 2012, it is fantastic in many respects. We are a victim of our own success. Rachel already outlined in her report that There's currently 90 students enrolled for a 80 placement school, and this new build is a reflection of that. Large credit due to the staff, the supporters, the parents whose learners are at the school, because they do a fantastic job. And before I'm inundated from secondary heads for new pools in their school, can I please just advise you it is for therapeutic purposes, and it's not what we'd see in other schools. So if head teachers are listening to this, please don't ring me after asking for a new swimming pool. But no, my thanks to the staff, my thanks to Rachel's team. It is just an unfortunate position. We've had reports back on Maindy, pandemic, cost of living, war in Ukraine, etc., and the pressures that put on building. You know, more power to your elbow for getting this sorted out. And thank you, members, for passing a budget that allows us to do that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Clark. I don't see any other hands up, so thank you, Rachel, for that report. Takes us on the agenda item 14. Oh, sorry, my apologies. Recommendations for that are on page 395. We better pass it first. Can I ask members whether they agree the recommendations? Thank you. Anybody against the recommendations? Any abstentions? That report is carried. Thank you very much. Takes us to agenda item 14, which is the update on the political balance, committee chairs and membership of committees. This report starts on page 397. Nancy Thalkar, Head of Democratic Services, could you deliver your report for us, please?
Yes, thank you, Presiding Member. This report is to update members on political balance, committee chairs and membership of committees. Two main changes to report. One, following the by-election on the 27th of February in Lantarnham, Councillor Jason O'Connell has been elected as a new member for Lantarnham. Councillor O'Connell has confirmed that he is not a member of a political group and that he'll be a non-group independent councillor. The other change is to notify of a new group being formed. Councillors Elizabeth Haynes, Catherine Bonera, Mark Jones and Chris Tew have formed a new political group to be known as the Independent Group. Councillor Chris Tew has been named as the leader of this newly formed group. So they are the two changes. One more change that I'll mention here is the scrutiny chairs have changed. The majority party continue to hold 3 of the scrutiny chairs, and the 2 other chairs, one is for the independent group, and they have the Prosperous Communities Overview and Scrutiny Committee, and Mark Jones is the new chair there, and the independent group maintain 1 committee chair, Healthier, and Councillor Janet Jones is the chair there. The political balance figures are on Appendix A. So there are 90 politically balanced seats available. So the percentages of those are 81% of the 90 available seats are for the majority of the Labour group, 10.81% belong to the independent group, which is 10 seats, and 8.11% belong to the Torfaen independent group, which is 8 seats. So the groups are listed there, members of all groups are listed there on Appendix A, and Appendix B are the seats on these committees. So these have been updated to reflect the changes. I won't read them all out because there's 3 pages. I don't know if anyone's got any questions on them, anything they need to say. I think it's quite...
Any comments? I've got Ron Burnett with a hand up, thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And once again, Nancy, thanks for all the hard work you've once again put in to sort this out. And I hope eventually the new independent group have found what they've been looking for. This isn't a game, you know, it's serious. And I just hope they're serious about carrying this group for the next 4 years into the future. Thanks very much.
Councillor Burnett, any other questions or queries for Nancy on this report? Anything else to say, Nancy?
No, that's all, thank you.
Thank you very much. That takes us to the recommendations, which are on page 393. Can I ask members if they agree with those recommendations? Thank you. Any members against the recommendations? Any members would like to abstain from the recommendations? That's carried. Thank you very much. That takes us to agenda item 15, the appointment of replacement head of democratic services. Delith Harris, Monitoring Officer and Assistant Chief Legal Officer, could you deliver this report for us, please?
Thank you, Madam Presiding Member. The purpose of this report is to agree the appointment of a new head of democratic services as a result of the current head leaving the Council on the 31st of March this year. The Local Government Wales Measure 2000 requires a local authority to designate one of its officers as the statutory head of democratic services, and the functions of this post holder are set out in the report. The matter has been considered by the Democratic Services Committee in accordance with the legislation, and that committee has designated the Director of Corporate Services as the head of democratic services. In accordance with the Constitution, Council now has to formally make that appointment. So the recommendation is for the Director of Corporate Services to be appointed as the head of democratic services. Thank you, Presiding Member.
Thank you, Delith. Any comments on that? No. Can I just say the recommendations start on page 403 of the report? Can I ask members if they agree with these recommendations, please? Any members against the recommendations? And any abstentions? Thank you very much. That's carried. Thank you, Della. That takes us to agenda item 16. I'm now declaring an interest and I'll have to leave the room, and I'm handing over the meeting to Councillor Stuart Ashley, the Deputy Presiding Member. Thank you.
So I'm in the seat for just a few minutes here. Jason Lewis, Director of Corporate Service, could you please? Is everybody out of the room? I should ask.
Chair, just give us one moment.
You've got me, have you? Check everybody's out. Then, and I'm now going to do a simple thing and hand over to Jason Lewis, Director of Corporate Service. Could you please deliver your report for us, please?
Thank you, Chair. My executive member is going to present the report to you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Member. As members will know, by 31st of March each year, we are required to approve and to publish a pay policy statement. This aspect of the Localism Act of 2011 fosters greater transparency about pay in the public sector. So the statement sets out the decision-making arrangements for senior pay. It includes the role of the Council and the Independent Remuneration Panel for Wales. Gosh, that's a mouthful. It describes the relationship between senior pay and median or average pay. This council sets those relationships well within the recommended range. We set it at 4.8 to 1 for our Chief Executive and 8.1 to 1 for Chief Officers, which I believe is the lowest ratio in Wales. So we're getting value for money from our Chief Executive and our Chief Officers. It also includes the pay scales, increases to which are negotiated at a national level by negotiating bodies, a topic that's very fresh and new information is emerging as we speak. There are no significant changes to this statement from last year. I draw your attention to our ongoing commitment to align our lowest pay rate with that recommended by the Living Wage Foundation, which a leader's already touched on. This is £10.90 per hour when compared with the national living wage set by government at £10.42 per hour. I'd therefore like to recommend the pay policy statement to Council for approval, and Jason is here now to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Are there any members wanting to, wishing to comment or ask a question? I can't see in the chamber. I have to rely on Jason to.
There were none in the chamber, Chair.
Right. Anybody on? Nobody online that I can see. I've got the tick box here. So do you want to go to vote on that? So I'm asking members whether they agree the recommendations. Those that agree, hands up. Those that disagree, any hands? Any disagreements? I can't see any, and any that wish to abstain. So from what I can see, Chris, can you tell me that's unanimous?
It is, Chair, thanks.
Thank you very much. That's my bit done for the day. Could you ask everybody to come back in and ask the Madam Presiding Officer, she's back in the chair. That's the first and last time I've done that this session. Thank you very much for your help and forbearance, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that, Councillor Ashley.
Thank you, Chair. I enjoyed that. Madam Officer, back to yourself.
I think we're all back in now. So that takes us to agenda item 17, motions on notice. There are no motions on notice, so we move on to agenda item 18, which is the members' question time. There are 2 members' questions for today. Can I ask Councillor David Thomas to ask his first question, please?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Presiding Member. Can the Executive Member for Adult Services and Housing please confirm the authority's intention for the site at Llanrhaven Care Home, explore if it can be used to alleviate pressure at the Grange or Royal Gwent Hospital, or will it be left neglected and allowed to deteriorate like the last closure of a care home at T Gwent?
Sorry,
yeah, certainly, Councillor Thomas. But surely our hope for Llanrhaven Court is to get it back to being a well-respected, high-quality residential care as soon as possible. You know, in the comments on Argus, the Argus article about it, you could see lots of people referring to the home being a high-quality home that they had known many years ago. We want it to get back to that. I should clarify that the building and land is privately owned, so it's not in our gift. We have very limited control over what the owners ultimately choose to do with the site. However, early market indications are that other care providers have interest in the site, and we will be following those developments very closely. With regards to former T Gwyn care home, the leasehold for the site is currently held by Havard, and since the home was decommissioned, Torfaen officers have been working hard to get this site to a position where development can begin. Asset management are working on Havard relinquishing the rights to the site with a view to disposal to Bronavon. A preliminary application has been made to planning. However, there have been issues on the site relating to nearby woodland which has been identified as ancient woodland. This has slowed the process considerably, as we have had to navigate construction without impacting significantly on the trees. However, negotiation is ongoing and hopefully nearing conclusion. Plans for this site involve affordable homes, including adapted properties which would complement the nearby Bronavon-owned bungalows. And despite the lack of planning permission, Bronavon have gained approval from their board to purchase the site. So we're hopeful that the transfer to Bronavon from Havard will be completed by the end of the financial year. Thank you for the interest.
Thank you, Councillor Daniels. That's good news for Fairwater. Councillor David Thomas, your next question, please.
If it's okay, Madam Presiding Member, I do have a supplementary question, if that's okay. Yeah, you mentioned, Councillor Daniels, that the care home is privately owned, and I was relieved to read that the care home has now been placed on the market for sale with the agents and recommending that the purchase for the use of the care home it remains as a care home in the future at a cost of £750,000. It would be wonderful if it could be bought jointly by the Health Board and Torfaen Council. Just for a little bit of information, you may know or may not, that Newport have 76 care homes, 8 of which are operated by Newport Council. Caerphilly have 66, 13 operated by Caerphilly. Monmouthshire have 41, 3 of them operated by Monmouthshire. Blaenau Gwent have 27, 2 of them operated by Blaenau Gwent. And Torfaen have 23, none of which are operated by Torfaen County Borough Council. So I guess I'm kind of looking to see if you would be interested in pursuing whether this council could jointly buy the care home.
Okay, right, that's quite a commitment to make right now. Yes, look, I've made clear plenty of times, you know, not just with domiciliary care, with residential care, that my view is that, and, you know, you can accuse me of ideology, but, you know, is that I think it's better provided in-house. How we get to there is, it's anyone's guess. It's a very, very long-winded process, to be honest with you. So, asked whether we could purchase it, I mean, you know, I don't know, is the honest answer. I would have to consult with financial colleagues, I would have to consult with social care colleagues. I think in the present climate, I think that the most realistic way of getting that home back to being a residential home is for another provider to buy it and to run out of it. If you're talking about us taking care homes back into in-house, I think we're probably looking at, as I said earlier, Welsh Government having the money to enable us to do that, and for UK Government to grasp the nettle when it comes to the social care crisis and enable us subsequently to be able to do that through funding. So I'm sorry I'm not able to, I mean, I'm not able to give that sort of commitment on the spot is the simple answer, really. We've just gone through a budget where we've committed to the year ahead. So that's my answer.
Thank you. Jason, did you want to comment on that or not?
Nothing additional to add to that, Councillor Seaborn, aside from, I guess, to add that in order to set up any residential facility, obviously it would be a lot more complex than purchasing the facility and having to set up a full infrastructure of care provision underneath that as well. So there would be much more, I think, many further considerations around that question.
Thank you for that. David, do you want to ask your second question to Councillor Anthony Hunt, the leader, please?
Yes, thanks for that, Madam Presiding Member. The WLGA competency framework states that a cabinet member is accountable for choices and performance in the portfolio. Who is accountable for the repeated failure of projects and waste of public money, such as the solar farm at Teacoke?
Councillor Hunt.
Thank you, Presiding Member. To begin with, I'd like to welcome your new Lantern Ward colleague to this council and wish Councillor O'Connell well in his role alongside yourself and Councillor Slade. The job we all do representing residents is a great privilege that we share, and my door is always open to any member wishing to discuss the people in place that we represent. Thank you for your councillor question, Councillor Thomas. Get those in the right order. But I must challenge its premise, especially after the stable and prudent budget table today at Council, and in particular on the solar farm project. A climate emergency has been declared by our Council. This has to involve action, not just words, if we are to meet our carbon reduction targets. Investing in renewable energy is an essential part of those efforts. So whilst the solar farm project can't proceed at this time, due to factors outside of our control, we'll need to take this learning forward for renewable energy and carbon reduction projects, so I don't accept that the money on it is wasted. I'd also ask the costs are viewed in context of the Council's £222 million annual budget, as discussed today. More widely, we must take great care with public money, but we also need to promote a positive culture that promotes innovation, growth and continuous improvement. More than ever, councils are operating in a rapidly changing environment, so taking appropriate positive risks is essential if we are to address challenges we face and keep our services sustainable. Officers and members involved in decisions work hard to ensure that calculated risks are taken and do all they can to avoid potential harm such as financial loss, reputational damage or legal liability. This is the complex world in which we operate. However, there will always be events like the pandemic which can't be foreseen, or issues like access to grid capacity which are not in our control. As members, we have a crucial leadership role in creating the right culture within our organisation. This includes setting the right tone for innovation, as well as creating an environment that encourages creativity, experimentation and learning, including from things that sometimes don't work out exactly as planned. We need to be accountable and set clear delivery objectives, but that's not the same as a destructive blame culture when things don't go to plan. If we acted this way every time a project didn't go to plan, we'd drive a very different culture within our organisation, a culture where openness and honesty would be suppressed and where ideas and opinions couldn't be shared. Ultimately, that would mean a culture where innovation and improvement would be impossible and opportunities would be lost. Instead, we should check challenging targets and monitor actions, progress and outcomes carefully and challengingly, but if we come up short, it's usually best to learn and develop together to ensure we do better in the future. As leader of the organisation, I want to set an example and demonstrate a willingness to take positive and appropriate risks. Yes, we must scrutinise and challenge appropriately, but when officers know they'll be supported and not targeted, they'll be far more effective in developing and delivering the ambitions set out in our plans. I'd encourage all members to support officers in the same way.
Thank you, Rita. Thank you, David.
Madam Presiding Member, unfortunately, I do have another supplementary question. Try not to bore everyone too much with it. So basically, judging on your answer there, Councillor Hunt, there's going to be no challenge or accountability to anybody that fails with public money. I mean, this is a multi-million-pound business, and I believe that action must be taken for the losses of taxpayers' money. So I just want to clarify that you're basically saying that there is no accountability at the end to anyone that loses public money on failed projects.
Can you answer that, Councillor Hunt?
There's shared accountability, but my point is that it's best when we work together to improve in the future, and I don't believe that money has been wasted on the project that you outlined.
Thank you. Are you satisfied with that answer, Councillor Thomas? Thank you very much for your questions. Takes us to agenda item 19, which is the Cabinet decisions of the 14th of the 2nd, 2023. Cabinet decisions start on page 431 and are for the Council to note. There were no challenges to any of the decisions. Members have any comments or questions for those? No? Can I ask members whether they agree with the recommendations, please? Thank you. Any members against those recommendations? Are there any members that would like to abstain from those recommendations? As carried, noted. Thank you very much. Takes us to the date and the time of the next meeting. For your information, members, the next meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, the 25th of April, 2023 at 10 a.m. Thank you for attending the meeting this morning. That closes the meeting. Thank you very much.